Hi everyone, hello. I'm Stuart, I'm from Music Ally. We do journalism and training and stuff. We don't do an app for children to dance. That's a different thing called Music Ally. So I don't have any data on what 11-year-olds are dancing to on phones, just in case anyone asks.
It's highly inappropriate music in my house.
I can't talk about it actually legally. But yes, so it's weird for me to be moderating this because actually I quite often give the data panel at conferences a miss because they're often quite dull. They're often like a bunch of people who sit there solemnly going, there's lots of data in the modern music industry, and they all nod. And then they go, and the key is making sense of that data, and they all nod again. And then that's kind of as far as it goes. So we're going to try really hard not to do that today, and that's why I'm actually really excited, because we have a really interesting panel, everyone with a slightly different perspective and a different place. And we're going to try and just knock that on the head straight away and say, yes, those two things are correct, but what is the useful data? How is everyone here using it, figuring out how is it making decisions in their businesses, and hopefully it's a bit more useful. So we have Sam from Spotify, who is involved in the internal side of Spotify's data rather than the external artist label stuff. We have Síofra from K7, who is on the independent label side, but you've also been working with data before in the past as a marketing role. So you've been doing stuff for artists for a while.
Messing about with data for quite a while.
That's good. And we have Chloé from Bandsquare, and you're on the side of kind of creating a platform, a tool for people to dig into their data and understand.
Exactly.
And they have this bloke on the end who somehow snuck onto this panel.
Yeah, sorry.
Who actually, Chris, you're one of the people I've seen do data presentations at conferences that are really interesting, and you come away with, I've learned some really, really interesting stuff. So actually, I really would always enjoy listening to you about data. So we have 4 very varied perspectives. So I
also ran the global insight team at EMI and Universal.
Yes. Yeah. So I was flattering you so much, I forgot what I was saying. So we're going to start, I suppose we're going to start with talking to everyone here about how they're using data, some of the things they've learned, some of the things they've done, how data has informed decision making, and then we're going to broaden it out a bit to talk about some of the issues around this. So I'm going to pick on you first.
Yay!
Because you're working at an independent label, but
yes.
a well-known, respected one, but I'm guessing you don't have 50 data analysts in a room doing data crunching like a major label might. So how are you using data? What's been working for you?
I think one of the things that you start with thinking about when you're using data is what do you want to use it for? So if you're building a new artist, for example, you want to start with artist engagement. So then you look at Facebook and you look at likes, and one of the things that Spotify, the insights give you is not just the listen rate, but how many people are saving the music to their own playlists. You can look at the YouTube stats and see what the retention rate is for songs. And I think that kind of stuff is really important when you're building an artist. If you're just trying to build sales, then you look at past sales records. You look at sales records of similar artists, and that can just come from your own information systems. It's really depending on what kind of data you want, what you want to use it for. So we just use a lot of different tools. Obviously, we do have our own sales viewers in place, but they're not as sophisticated as I would imagine would be at a major label. So then we use a lot of different tools as well. So like the Spotify insights that you have, the YouTube insights. We also use Chartmetric quite a lot as a tool because that can give you a very good overview of what's happening on all the different types of platforms. And yeah, that's it's just really trying to use as much data as you can. But this is really going to say database data. It's very boring. Let's have a look at what we've got. But it's there are a lot of tools that are available that are also available for free or at a very low paid tier for you. And just really trying to make sense of, okay, for example, we're running a Facebook campaign that's based on clicks. So you're using the link via link, and then you see it's okay, we're getting a lot of click-throughs from Germany, for example. But that could also be because the ads are just cheaper in Germany than they are in the UK. So then you go into the link via link and seeing okay, well, who's actually buying the records or who's actually clicking through to listen to it, and then you can go into Spotify Artist Insights and see okay, so from all the people that have gone to Spotify in Germany, how many have actually saved the track to their own playlists, and that's something that you could really use within your own campaigns and then allocate your budgets accordingly.
It sounds like this idea of data as layers, you can go in and see a big number, But it sounds like you're thinking quite hard about, well, why is that big number big? What's the number that might show me more that's not on the surface? Like the idea of burrowing into it a bit more and saying, right, it's not maybe about views, it's about engagement.
No, it's definitely about engagement. I think that's much more important than the amount of views that you get. I mean, we get sales data coming in from distributors and streaming data. And for example, we've got one of our artists, Hani El Khatib, and he's streaming into the millions. And we're really kind of going, where is this coming from? Because we don't understand. And then it turns out that one of his tracks has been used in a motorcycle video. So we're monetizing on it, but we're not actually getting any kind of engagement on it. So we're not seeing any kind of sales spikes there at all. Simply because it's not being linked to him as an artist, and people are engaging with the video content rather than with him as a musician. Mm.
That makes sense. And I guess even like playlists, like I might look on Spotify and see, oh, so-and-so's got 1 million listeners. But that might be because they're on a playlist with 6 million listeners.
Yes.
And next week they have 2 listeners because no one's listening anymore.
Yes.
That's fair.
Yeah, data can be quite deceptive. So I think it definitely is important about getting into the layers and using different platforms and seeing like where you're actually connecting. Mm-hmm.
That's right. And I, as an independent label, I'm guessing you don't have this massive budget for data tools. But how do you figure out what can be useful to you when you have to do something yourself versus using a platform? Like how do you judge whether something can really help you get to the heart of this?
I think one of the things that we do, because we work with very small budgets, we tend to do a lot of test runs. That we don't just go, okay, we've got £500 for a budget, we're just going to run engagement ads or just run buy ads around the album launch, because that I think is what a lot of people would do. But then we kind of go, okay, now we're going to put £50 in this market, £50 in that market, £50 in that market. Let's see what happens, and then where you've got the best connection, where you've got the most engagement or the most buys, and then you say, okay, so that's a strong market. Let's just refocus on that. So it's really about monitoring everything that you're doing, using very small budgets initially, and then seeing, okay, that's working, and then you just double down on that.
That seems to be something I hear a lot about, like that idea. It's not like for our business, we write about things like, oh, an augmented reality app for this artist, or whizzy things. And then we talk to marketers, they're like, yeah, actually, I tried this little thing that is hard to explain.
Yeah.
It doesn't sound very sexy, but actually when we did it, it worked really well.
Yeah.
And then we got this many sales from doing this thing. Like that using data often doesn't make headlines in that way.
It really, really doesn't. And I think that one of the things that I really like about using Facebook, this is something that's very important that sometimes gets missed quite a lot, is that you can just run campaigns and that you then, you use... So one thing that we always do, so for example, when we're launching a new video, that we embed the video on the artist's website and then link to that rather than just posting a YouTube video on Facebook. One of the reasons why is that you can just put a pixel onto the website page, and then you can see how many people are going through. You can gather that audience, and then you can just really say, okay, so I can make a custom audience on Facebook for people who've engaged with the artist in the last 30 days. And then you can retarget that audience. So it's not just a case of, okay, I'm just going to throw it out there and hope something sticks. You can actually get to those people who've already shown an interest in that artist and just target slightly more directly towards them. Also, you don't have to do things like watch this new video because they've already seen the video. Yeah. That's something that if you get the same, everybody has it. If you've got the same ad coming through 3 times a day in your news feed, you really kind of like, oh, bloody fuck off, and it's like, I'm not interested in this, and then you stop seeing any ads at all. So it's you just need to be a little bit smart and just try small things, try small budgets initially, and then take it from there.
Yeah, and we're talking about data as one big thing when in fact you've got data monitoring, as you say. So you start something small and just watch what happens.
Yeah.
You've got data before that where you look at the world as it stands before you, and you look at what worked before, what was kind of where you think you are in the market. So you've got your static start where you've got a snapshot of the world. You've then got, what shall we try? Let's watch it as it comes in. And then you've got a data collection element where it's then about hauling those people later on so that you can go back to an engaged audience and hit them, as you say, with the right messages.
Yeah.
And it's like, I'll bring up the biggest cliche. I'll do the cliche. But the idea of advertising 50% is wasted, you don't know what half is wasted. It's a famous marketing thing. But like you know which 50 quid was wasted and which did well, and then you double down, it becomes... Yeah.
You don't know if it was worth 50 quid.
Yeah. So, I guess me understand, because you're at a different point of view. You're at a large global streaming service with just trillions and trillions of things happening every day.
Yeah.
And you're trying to make sense of it, I guess, for Spotify and to understand what you can do. I mean, talk about, I suppose, what you're doing first.
Yeah, so my team's the content insights team, and we do analysis across all of content at Spotify, which of course means music in Spotify's context. So we're working closely with the teams who are working with labels and artists. We work with the licensing teams. We work with the editorial teams who are creating Spotify playlists, and increasingly some podcasts and video data as well. And what we're doing is we're basically partnering very closely with them on the business side so that we can help them to use insights to make better decisions and to improve what they're doing. So we're sort of combining the expertise that those teams have with our understanding of what they're doing and our understanding of the data to help them to improve how they're doing things.
Which is kind of, I guess, in the music industry, people can get a bit defensive about that. You know, I've got guts, I can sign bands, I can do this, that. But in the tech world, like this idea of data-informed decisions is not controversial at all. People are...
I mean, it's still, there's still sort of that, you've got to get that balance, I think. And we would never want to be a team who's saying you're not following the data, so you're not doing it right. We have so many experts in music who work at Spotify who you need to draw on their experience and their expertise and combine it with data. So I think probably the best example is the way in which our editors are creating playlists. So they're experts in a certain genre or maybe a certain region, and they're choosing tracks based on what they know about the music and what they love and what they're hearing in the music. But they're using data from that point onwards a lot to see how that track is performing. Are people skipping over it in the playlist? Are people saving it to their own playlist and coming back to it? If that's the case, they'll move it up or down in the playlist, or maybe add it to a different playlist, and they're using data to understand the audience of that different playlist and put it in there instead. And it's really that combination of using the data but also their own expertise and experience.
It's funny because I've heard from some marketers recently who, I suppose traditionally they have a song out and sort of get the artist to tweet saying, my song's on Spotify, here's a link. But now they're saying, my song's on this Spotify playlist and a link to the playlist. And in their heads, they talk about that as well. If our fans go and stream it from that playlist, they'll all listen to the whole song. And there's a perception that the data within Spotify will then show that playlist person, oh, lots of people are playing this song, maybe I'll move it up. Like people on the outside are understanding that Spotify uses data to bump things up when they're doing well.
Yeah, and I think for us it's also that there's we're talking about different levels of understanding. So we now know, and most people in the industry now know, that if you get added to a today's top hits, you're going to get a big bump in your streams from that. What my team are working on trying to better understand is, okay, but what happens afterwards? How are those tracks then added to users' own playlists, and how often are users coming back to those tracks? What's the sort of bump later on, 6 months, a year down the line? What difference is it making? Are there some playlists where people are going to come back 100 times to that track, whereas other playlists where people are only coming back 10 times, and how do the different playlists work against each other? So it's that sort of next level of understanding that is what we're trying to get to.
That makes sense. And I think we were talking before this about the idea of you can see how artists are breaking, but also to some extent Spotify is kind of getting involved in that and breaking them using data in that. I mean, how is that side of things working for what you do?
Yeah, so for a long time Spotify has wanted to help to break artists, but didn't necessarily define what that actually meant. So we've been using data to try and see how artists have broken in the past. And what sort of thresholds you might need to reach. What does it mean? So there's a combination of getting to a bigger audience is obviously important, and lots of people listening to your music. But on Spotify, if you're in a big playlist, people might actually be finding you by accident. So again, are they coming back to it? So are they listening to that track because they've actually searched for it, or they're playing it in their own playlists? And then also trying to compare that to what's going on outside of Spotify. So we've used some survey data in the past to understand how artists outside of Spotify are growing as well. And once we have all that information, that understanding, we can work it into what we're doing with artists to try and push them to that next level.
Okay, which is interesting, because I know, again, I talk to a lot of artists they're pitching to playlists, and they know they have to go in with data, and it has to be good data, because I think, who is it? It's a guy in the States who does the Rap Caviar playlist.
Tuma.
Yeah, and he was talking about people will be telling me something on the phone saying, yeah, we're massive, growing, and then he'll be like, I got the data right here, and I can call you out on that. Okay, so Grant, I mean, I suppose the other thing is I mean, I see Spotify has some press releases about this. Like sometimes there are cultural moments and things happening in the world that Spotify data chimes with. I mean, how are you? I mean, do you see interesting spikes? Sometimes that.
All the time. Some of which are just sort of a bit bizarre and never fail to surprise me. So there was the example recently where there was the eclipse in the US, and every time there's an eclipse anywhere in the world, streams of Bonnie Tyler Total Eclipse of the Heart will go up, and it's just this almost bizarre behaviour. I don't understand why there's an eclipse. Quick, go to Spotify, put it on. But someone in our data team actually did a mapping of like the way that the eclipse moved across the US and the spikes in Bonnie Tyler as you can track, and it's just hilarious. I love that sort of stuff.
Imagine when the eclipse in the news, Bonnie Tyler picks up a speedboat catalogue and goes, right.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Grant, I suppose turn to Chloé, because you're on the side of also building technology to help them make sense of data. So what are you seeing? Because I suppose your whole company is about responding to what labels, management, music people need. So what are your trends you're seeing?
So, all the customers of Bandsquare have different needs in terms of data.
Oh, we should talk about what Bandsquare is in case. Who knows what Bandsquare is? Does everyone? Okay, maybe do like a sort of this is what it is.
So Bandsquare, the survey and data management platform, especially collecting social data, which means every time you're just launching a contest or just asking what type of merch would you like to have to your fans through your social networks or through your website, you can collect all their favorite brands, favorite media, like favorite TV shows, radio programs, press magazines, etc. So this is a technology that not just only collect emails and turn your online audiences into qualified email databases, it's also a technology that helps you to better monitor your Facebook budget, for instance, or if you're on another level of use, your real-time bidding process. So it really depends on what are the needs for indie artists. On the scale, indie artists just want to turn their online audiences into knowledge about how to better understand how to market their products in terms of where are you fans? What do you want from me? What is your favorite song? And it's not only because there is a lot of streams on Spotify or Deezer that it's your favorite song. And so all those kind of market research, I would say. And the other one is collect the data, email data to just push and send newsletters. So these are the kind of data that independent artists are really looking into when they are going to subscribe to Bandsquare. But for the labels and for media and communication agencies, it's much more about, okay, it's not my job to know where to tour, so the artist can launch a contest about this and that can help him. But I mean, it's not my job, but it's more about all along the year, collect data to better understand the consumer habits, and especially if I want to find some sponsors, because I'm launching contests and collecting the data about the favorite brands and media companies, I can understand better where to go and do a promotion, and where to just find sponsors for my next event, concert, festivals, launch album, etc. So definitely the way they are using Bandsquare is more advanced because it's all along the year and it has partnerships involvements. And the last thing is that they're using it for exactly just what you did. After prototyping the budget on Facebook, they are optimizing with the Facebook pixels and the custom audiences that those surveys created. And so if you don't have a website which is apparable, yes, that you can use to just collect the pixel Facebook and everything. You just use Bandsquare for all the landing pages of all the contests that you can use. So yes, in terms of trends in the data, what we say that is it's also not only getting all the knowledge from the social networks and the Facebook page likes of your fans, it can become really big brother in a term, but I mean, it's really useful for finding sponsors and brands, and etc. But it's not only this, it's also taking the time to just ask questions to your fans. It's the same shift as the marketing has seen in shifting from the CRM, customer relationship management, where they were pushing marketing messages, to VRM, vendor relationship management, where in fact you're just pushing the messages that people are expecting from you. So you're asking your fans directly what they want. Sometimes the questions are really cash, like I remember, not for Lucy Rose, but for Justin Bieber, for Joel Adams, kind of Justin Bieber artist, only one song, asking his fans if they were more interested in getting a whole album or just merch, and fans were just answering merch.
That's kind of
yes.
useful data and also slightly heartbreaking for him.
That's it. But he discovered that he should just push marketing on just like where the YouTubers and the gamers are doing, instead of what the, I would say, albums or multi-albums artists are doing. And so this was interesting, and the questions were very cash. It's like, how much would you pay for these type of t-shirts from my merch? Those kind of things. But people are involved in the process, and it's very smooth and friendly for them, so they're just answering. And asking fans is also another trend that just goes into engagement data, which is much more relevant because it's real-time engagement data and with specific figures on it.
So, it's interesting, isn't it? That whole idea of collecting data sounds a bit creepy in Big Brother, like you say, but asking people questions about what they want is a much more friendly idea, even if it is collecting the data, like say.
And that question coming from a credible source who you don't mind telling the answer to, rather than it just being, I'm not quite sure what the gesture was, jet lagged, but being crept for and being collected about you.
That was air piano.
That was it, air piano. I've been accused of dance moves earlier when I was just pointing through slides. It's been a long week, guys.
Okay. It's interesting because, like, again, the idea of brands, like, that's the easy assumption would be, oh, right, I fancy a pair of Levi jeans, so I'm going to go to them and ask them to give me free stuff. But now it's more about going and saying, I know my fans like this brand, we should do something together. So it's kind of almost a pitch, I guess.
Exactly, and what's interesting is that, so you're just surveying first your fans, you know what kind of brands they like, but then after you just go to any sponsor and say, hey, I have this amount of emails for you. We can share the data if it's opt-in. But I mean, you can share the data, we can share it, but you can also expand my reach by communicating those same surveys or same partnership through your social networks too. So we had this special concrete use case by a French DJ called Wax Taylor, I don't know if you know him, willing to travel outside, thanks. Thanks, because each time I'm saying Deezer, there is only half of the audience saying, what? So Wax Taylor was willing to go for a tour outside France and especially in the US. He spotted on Spotify and on Deezer that there was some people listening to him over there, but he wasn't really sure because of the playlist thing that someone can just listen to you because you're in a playlist, not because he knows you really. So they were just asking where would you like to see me tour, which is kind of contest you can do, among others. And he realized that not only he was able to make a tour in 5 different cities in the US, but also he could find sponsors, going to them and saying, hey, I know that there is those fans, like he was maybe 10,000 fans in the same town willing to pay for a ticket to see him play. And the question was, with which brands should I sponsor? And so he discovered through the audience analysis, through Bandsquare, which were the brands to go. And then just having the power of negotiation to tell to a brand that, yes, you have this amount of data that you can share with them. And then, so I don't remember actually the name of the brand, but the brand did also same thing and shared on his social networks. And it's just made that his Facebook fans in the US It went up from maybe it was 700 only before. A lot of them were not already on Facebook, his Facebook fans when they answered the question, but when it finished and the whole thing finished, he had maybe 7 times this. So yes, it's a question of just expanding your reach through partnerships and using the data as a leverage for that.
Yeah. Live sounds quite fun to me because I always imagine bands or managers going, they're really popular, they could do a 10,000 venue, and the promoter's job is saying, I'm not sure they're ready for that, but we'll do this. But then now if you have the data, both sides of those can say, yeah, actually, maybe they can play this. I mean, I guess we're going to open it out. I mean, with Chris, we're going to open up the whole discussion to, I suppose, starting with bad data. What's not useful data? Because I know I've seen you talk about this, and we've talked about this before, that there's things can come out that are just wrong or useless, but because we're so like, we must get all the data, we maybe think, oh, this someone said some data, it must be true, and let's go for it.
I mean, so there are some situations where data is not the most helpful thing. And so data usually, if well collected, we'll come on to that, gives you a pretty good idea of what happened, hopefully. Whether what happened before is a good indication of what happens next is a key question when looking at data to make a decision. Because if what's happening next is nothing like what's gone before, the historic data is far less useful to you. Not completely irrelevant, but potentially. Because if what happens going forward is completely different to the past, why would you look backwards? In terms of bad data, so there are bad situations in which to use data. There's probably bad timing on data. So we've heard the phrase real-time 2 or 3 times, and I sometimes really like real-time data, and sometimes I can't keep up. It keeps, I was going to swear, I haven't sworn on stage yet, I'm keeping it. It keeps bloody changing. I can't keep up. By the time I finished a thought, the next one's there. And sometimes real-time is an obsession we get caught with, because you've got to go, what's happening now? There's a joke to be had about major record execs watching the chart minute by minute to just see how their artist's doing. Like, guys, you've got other stuff to do. It's going to be okay. It's still going to be there like in an hour's time, in 3 hours' time. And so there's a challenge around when data is useful and how long it stays useful for. And so there are times when, in spite of being very happy building big data platforms, I yearn for the weekly chart. And by Monday lunchtime, you've worked out, cool, that's the data crunching for the week, what's next? You understand where you are. You can get a load more information now, I see the value in it. But making sure that you are asking the deep enough question, infrequently enough to have time to act on it, is really important. Does that last point make sense? I've lost my words.
Yeah. Yes, do you not?
Cool.
Yeah. I was going to say, because I mean, from your point of view, you could be, oh, Facebook's showing this is showing that. How do you avoid being sucked into
the data pool and constantly just looking at it? I mean, I think it's one of those things that Chris is saying is like, okay, you kind of have to take your moments as to when you're going to look at this. So, for example, when you're going, okay, so we've now launched this single, let's keep an eye on what's happening, and then you just look at it, not the day of release, but, you know, maybe the day after, and then see it's like, okay, that's going well, or that's going terribly. I don't really know. But you don't track it like hour by hour. That's just completely nonsensical. And it's one of those things that you kind of, if you have the time, I mean, obviously we don't have the time to look at each and every artist and each and every release all the time. So, you know, you just try and keep an eye on it as best you can. So you just take a moment once a week, maybe, to look at the data. And if you can see like a spike somewhere, think of, okay, so what happened on that day? So, for example, if you've had a Pitchfork premiere, for example, or a video launching via Nowness, and then you can see it's like, okay, so what effect has this actually had a week later on the campaign? And if you see that, okay, the Pitchfork premiere, it was great, but it only got us so many plays, then you can say it's like, maybe in the future, Pitchfork isn't the right platform for this artist to launch on. You know, same could happen that what we're seeing right now, for example, is certain platforms wanting to launch a single or premiere a single via their SoundCloud link. And then thinking, like, well, that might be great, and you might have millions and millions of followers, but at the same time, it's like your engagement rate, from what I'm seeing from all the past premieres that you've had, is quite low. especially if I compare it to the artists that we've got that might only have like a tenth of the amount of followers that you've got, but at least I know that everyone there is going to listen to it as soon as you drop the track. So it's using past data. I think it's one of the things, when you're using bad data, it's really a case of just, if you're only taking like a backstage view and you're only looking at the overview and you're not actually willing to dig into what's happening, that's when you can let it lead to very bad decision making.
I think that's the power of a good analyst who also understands the business context properly. There's nothing worse than when you have analysts who sit maybe in a completely different country to the teams who they're actually trying to advise and work with. What you want to do is you want to have people working in analysis who can help the business teams to actually use the data and to understand it, and also that they really understand what those teams are trying to do so that they can provide the right advice using the data and ask the right questions is the main thing, I think, rather than just throwing them a load of data that no one knows what to do with.
And get everyone back. Definitely. Makes sense. I'm thinking about the path we've gone on music data. Like and this is where I get checked out for being too well, because I remember getting the cards and CDs and you'd fill them in and send them off to the same place and get Leamington Spa. And someone went looking for that in an article recently and found the building. Yeah. But then we've gone through okay, there's all these social networks and streaming data, and now we're onto Facebook pixels and remarketing, all that stuff. Where's that curve going next? What will be the next big useful source of data, or what's coming through now that people in the room should be thinking, right, I need to get... Because I remember 2 years ago, someone mentioned retargeting and pixels, and I had no idea what it was. And I was like, I need to go and find out about that. So is there anything we can talk about today on stage that everyone here can then go off and...
Can I do the human side of it before we go down the tech route?
Okay.
So rare is it for people to actually ask other people questions nowadays? The risk is, with all this big data out there, with all this tracking of everything you've done online, I'm terrified of the granularity you can get into. I've only seen a fraction of it. But you can really understand a lot of what happened. But not why. And so, it's like you've seen my slides. That's
Why that matters.
There we go. To quote Sophie, it's the why that matters. Getting to that why is the only reason you get something to repeat. So if you understand why something happened, you can avoid the negative thing happening again, or you can make the positive thing happen more often. Without understanding why, you are hoping that those things will happen. So getting to the attitude that underpins behaviour is crucial. And for me, in a world of big data that is increasingly complex, there's a risk that we forget about the person who's creating that data, and to actually talk with them. And to Chloe's point, do you want merch or do you want an album? Which do you prefer? As a business, saves me an absolute fortune in printing the wrong thing. Have a chat. Just actually say hello. It's completely underdone in a world where we think we can understand everybody by looking at the dashboard we look at every other day. Would be my human answer. Is there a more technical answer?
I agree with you. Well, there is, of course, asking questions is today might not be scalable today, but tomorrow it could be. There were some major improvements in the AI with chatbots to just ask questions in a scalable way. We tried it on an act called Lucy Rose that you might know. And the fact is, it's still at the beginning of the chatbot really useful data, because chatbots are just buttons today. Doing real AI is still improving, and even the best players in that systems are just doing lazy chatbots. So by the time being, using a chatbot is very limited, and you need to limit it. But otherwise, for Lucy Rose, it came with a lot of problems because everyone was playing with the chatbot, more playing than just giving its data through kind of a conversation with Lucy Rose bot. And so it came to at the extent of sexual harassment to the bot.
Oh.
So yes, the chatbots are not ready to just collect data in a scalable way, but it's, I think, a major trend where research and development is going on.
That idea of when you're talking to people, like the conversation, I talk to my Alexa speaker, I would talk to chatbot. I don't think about that data but obviously there is data there. And then if you ask a chatbot, like Ollie Mercer's got a chatbot, hasn't he? And look, people will go to him and say, when are you coming to the Netherlands? And then in the future, maybe that bot will then come back 2 years later and say, oh, he's coming to the Netherlands, do you want tickets? Like every conversation becomes... But I suppose the last question I have before we go is the creepiness. Some of you have mentioned this idea of Big Brother and creepiness. Like, as music fans, are we just data sources to be harvested? And is there stuff we should talk about how that can be done and the pitfalls of that for the industry?
Do you want to go first, or?
I mean, the data that we work with, ensuring that it's always completely anonymous is really important. So if you were listening to Harry Styles for 8 hours solid yesterday, we would know that someone was listening to Harry Styles for 8 hours solid, but we wouldn't be able to identify you.
It's a good song, man.
The ad campaign that Spotify ran last year was like, to the one who listened to that particular heartbreak song for 8 hours on end on Valentine's Day. It's like, are you okay?
Yeah. We don't know who that person is, but that's a great stat.
Okay, so anonymizing big data is important then.
Yeah.
So like
And the bit to remember is that they don't care about the person. It's not about creeping on one person.
Yeah.
It's about
It's
getting
the
to
trends.
exactly an understanding of people en masse, so that you can send a Facebook ad that is not so personalised as it only hits one person, but it hits the right kind of audiences. And that's where I think with responsible companies like Spotify and Deezer and Apple and others, actually using that data to look at groups of people rather than individuals is where actually I'm much happier being treated as part of a group with the amount of information you have about me and using it in that context. I don't think it's about drilling down just to pick on me for listening to Forever Alone for 5 hours that one day.
Is it better now?
A little bit, but don't ask.
Okay. Well, we're about to have lunch, but there is a microphone. Does anyone have a question in the audience? We have a few. Okay. So I've seen you put your hand up before, actually. So do you want to jump in? No.
I kind of had one comment and one question. And the comment is, I love the idea about Bandsquare, going out and asking that question and stopping the whole sponsorship of the tour. It's not on, never mind.
It's all right. In a minute, he'll see my face.
Yeah.
Stopping the sponsorship of the tour being a corporate sellout and turning it into a corporate mugging. I love that. Which is really good fun. And I think the next one is a question about, again, I don't think this is right.
It's coming.
The other one really is a question about, are we homogenizing music in being either looking at playlists or working at Spotify or working at a label? Is responding to data, are we losing the emotion and the reality? And how does real, gritty, quite challenging, difficult music break through? 40 years ago it was punk. In the last few years perhaps it's been grime. How does that break through if we're kind of homogenizing and almost choosing to can data sort of formularize almost? I think I'm done. Does anyone else have this concern, though, about data and music? I really do.
Well, yes,
But does it make us all the same, is the question.
Well, could data have predicted grime or punk? Is a good question, isn't it? Like,
I think so.
It was people making the music and it came through and it bubbled up, but...
I mean, I'd hope that actually if you're properly understanding the data and using it wisely, it would be quite the opposite, and you could spot these sort of mini trends. So talking about grime, for example, we're looking at what's up and coming all the time and combining it with what the experts that we have in sort of urban music are understanding and what they're seeing. And it's the combination of those two things that will mean that you can help grime to get to a new audience, and we can build more grime playlists on Spotify, and we can build grime playlists that cater more to the mainstream and more to kind of up and coming artists as well, and meet both of those things if you're using the data wisely.
Okay.
I think it's one of those things, though, that, yes, we're all using data, but like you said in your own presentation, we're all fans of music here. So we all really care about music and we care about new developments. And I think that if something new and exciting comes along, we're still people who are looking at data and using it to our best advantage. So I'm not worried about music homogenizing at all, actually. I think it's going to become even more exciting simply because music is more available to us now than ever. And Yeah.
There's more opportunity to break through than perhaps
Yeah.
just lobbying one playlist guy at Radio 1 and one playlist guy at some
No,
other
exactly.
station. Perhaps more
Absolutely.
opportunity to bubble through.
Yeah.
I guess like there's that thing of the data could tell you to sign someone who sounds just like Ed Sheeran, but maybe have them be Spanish because Despacito and like that. But actually, it's more about.
Good analysis from Stu.
Yeah. But no, but what that would be the horror scenario. Like data tells me I should do what's big. This something, but actually, it's more I've signed something brilliant, and the data can help me find a million people who love that,
Exactly.
rather than data telling me what I should
Yeah.
sign. And
Yeah.
I mean, there was one more question down the front here. We might have time for if you want to go.
And there's one at the back as well, I think, Jerry's.
Am I allowed to go?
You're allowed to go over into lunch.
Okay, if you're the boss.
Yeah, I guess my question is the data showing that perhaps the album is dead? Because if you were to look at the consumption of the singles across an album, you're probably going to find that maybe there's 40% of that is actually making up the bulk of the streams. So those tracks that are redundant, the ones that are left over, have been proven to be filler by the people who are consuming the music. So does that mean that the data is now going to be influencing releases from labels and almost to signify the death of the album as a piece of work?
So all killer, no filler, but you can say actually those tracks are filler.
I don't think I would go so far as to say that it's showing that the album is dead, but what we are now able to do is to reveal those sorts of trends, and maybe it was something that has been happening for many years, but because we only had data on a one-off album purchase, before we didn't actually understand which of those tracks people were listening to. And I think hopefully it will sort of enable more creativity and more ways to sort of innovate on the album concept based on that understanding that we can sort of feed back to artists and artists can feed into their creative process.
And the album's not dead.
No.
Let's be clear on that.
No.
It still has
No.
a massive role to play, and even if all it achieves is that the bottom 4 of 12 tracks, once you're hooked in by the single, get played on a streaming service that pays out based on number of plays and share of attention, the presence of those, the option value of those is huge. And so albums still have a massive part to play. Every Christmas I resist writing a really ranty blog about the absence of the death of the album, while other people write about the death of the album. I don't see it anytime soon.
It's kind of fun, isn't it? Because so I'm not going to keep banging about Ed Sheeran, it's like something obsessive, but critics say Galway Girl is the terriblest song ever written. If you look at the critical response to that, the data suggests people are enjoying it, and they're continuing to enjoy it lots.
Yeah, my listening behaviour gives that away.
Yeah. So I'm allowed one more question you were saying at the back.
Carey at the back.
Yep.
Hi, yes. Thank you guys so much for this panel. It's been really great. My question is related to the previous two in terms of how data maintains versus breaks the status quo. So, and this is related to, so while there are all these new opportunities to gather and analyze data, I wonder to what extent people are still doing so in the service of very traditional definitions of success. So, as an example, one of my favorite bands, Grizzly Bear, released their latest album last month. And a week before, the frontman tweeted to his fans, "Guys, as weird as it sounds, first week's sales still matter for us so much, for all our festival bookings, for late night TV bookings." So he was pushing all his fans to buy his album in the first week or the first day. And so just to generalize that, I wonder, are you guys seeing data redefining success or still maintaining sort of old school mindsets? Yeah.
I think for a lot of bands, the first week sales really matter simply because you get the chart positions, which then means you get placements in stores online, but also in physical stores like the HMV and Amazon, and then that garners further sales because there are still people who go towards that and say, okay, I want to see what's popular. You get more media attention as well if you're in the charts or if you're not. So that's even in the digital age, that still really, really matters. And yeah, it's like I've forgotten the second part of the question. It's terrible.
I was just gonna say that what I was saying before about how we're understanding what a breaking artist means. There used to be sort of a threshold in the music industry of how many sales you had to get to be defined as broken, and that just doesn't exist anymore.
Well, because no one can sell 100,000 albums at the moment. But.
Yeah. No, but all right. So for example, I've worked with one of the artists, Run the Jewels, and if you look at the album sales on itself, it's okay, haven't really done all that much But then that's also because they give their album away for free, or at least they give their album away in exchange for a download. And if you incorporate that into the album sales, then yeah, they are like a multi-platinum artist. And for them, the success isn't defined by how much album sales or how much streams they've got. It's more about what kind of connection have we got with our fans, what stages are we on at festivals. So it becomes more about that. I think right now, maybe for a lot of bands, it's more about fan engagement rather than strict album sales. Yeah. Maybe.
Do you remember that year when the Brits got in lots of controversy because grime artists weren't nominated, and that's because the metric was album sales.
Yeah.
And they were like, well, they haven't been selling many albums, so they aren't really, and people were saying no, but they're culture importance, and it's on other things, and that was when they had to change the metric they were defining success by.
Well, absolutely, and I think that's probably the thing at the moment is when you've got to work with external partners who go on old metrics, you've got to keep the old metrics. The internal metrics are getting smarter and smarter and smarter. So Spotify, for instance, can spot a winner much earlier than before because they're doing a better job of understanding what works and what doesn't. I'm going to get lynched by Michael, I can see it.
Yeah, I promised Michael, he told me we could carry on. It's his fault. Well, that makes sense. I mean, so we probably do have to stop because my stomach is starting to rumble louder than the microphone. But I hope it's been interesting. I hope we've got beyond those two things of lots of data and things. But we're all around and hopefully come and talk to everyone and chat and enjoy the rest of the conference.